Just making sure it's going live on YouTube. Perfect. There we are. Everyone, welcome to the Centennial Podcast, although it's not really a podcast today. We are live with Ian Mendes. Ian Mendes, welcome to the show.
Matt, thanks for reaching out and thanks for having me.
No problem. And I know we're short a couple of hosts here today, but we'll make do with just myself here. And I thought we could start off with what everybody's been talking about in the Sens world recently, and it's the Brady Tkachuk mostly and Drake Batherson contracts. When are they getting signed?
Listen, I've been saying this all summer, and now that the calendar's flipped to September 1st, we've gotten here. Like, if you go back and read some of the stuff I've written or said in various interviews, I've always said, we're going to get to September, they're not going to be signed, and I don't want people to freak out. And I know that's really tough because I think for Ottawa fans, you've been through a lot in the last 3 or 4 years in watching your favorite players leave, and now you've got arguably your favorite player in Brady Tkachuk is up for a contract renewal, and you would love it if this was done 8 years and you didn't have to think about it. That's not the way these things always work, right? Like, so sometimes these things take a little bit longer, and it might just be a philosophical difference where Brady and his camp are thinking we'll take 3 years, and maybe the Senators are thinking we really want him for 7 or 8, and so it's a delicate dance. I just don't think that there's any reason to freak out or panic. I'll say this: I wouldn't even be shocked, Matt. Training camp opens in 3 weeks. That's the first pressure point for me. Like, get to training camp. Okay, now you can start to talk. We get to the 22nd of September and he's not there. You can talk me into, okay, now there's a little bit of pressure, but you'll never get me to buy into the fact that come opening night, he's not going to be there. I think he'll be there opening night. I think that's all that matters. And if you're asking me to guess, I'll say it's a 3-year deal, and I still don't think there's any reason to freak out. But that's what I think, or how I think it's going to play out with Brady Tkachuk.
Now, Drake Batherson hasn't been talked about as much, but where do you think he lands? Because I've heard anything from people saying, 2 years just to kind of, for maybe him to want to prove himself, show what he can really do, and then sign that long term. Some people are saying 3-year bridge, sign him 6 years now. What are you thinking?
It's a great question, right? Because I think there's some similarities, not necessarily in the style of player, but in the trajectory that we saw with Mark Stone, right? Remember when Mark Stone came in, he was kind of like a 4th-round pick, and he played for Team Canada. He really elevated his status, and then kind of very slowly it became evident that this guy's a really good player. And there's an argument to be made that right off the hop, when they gave Stone the 3-year deal, I think it ended up being 3 years, $10.5 million, there's an argument that right then and there, they should have locked him up to 6 or 7 years. So I get it. I see it. But if it were up to me, have we seen enough out of Batherson to warrant a 6-year deal at $5 million per? I don't know, right? And the thing is, Matt, you're going to have to deal with in the next year and a bit, Josh Norris is going to need a new deal. Timmy Stutz is going to need a new deal. Shane Pinto is going to need a new deal. Like, some pretty good players are going to need some deals. You can't just give everybody everything that you need, so or that they want. So I would say I could see Batherson coming in again, 3 years, and maybe it's around that money that Stone signed, $10 million, whatever. But I don't think there's anything right or wrong. And I'd like to point this out too, is that I think even if these guys signed 8-year deals or they signed 3-year deals, it doesn't matter. The team has to show the ability to spend to win. And let's use Brady Tkachuk for an example, Matt. Let's say Ottawa gives Tkachuk the 8-year deal that everyone's screaming for. Well, what happens if 3 years from now they're not competitive, and 3 years from now they're not spending to the cap? You know that Brady Tkachuk can easily just say, you know what, I'm out of here. So I want to be very cautious when people say that you sign an 8-year deal. It doesn't mean it guarantees you that you're going to be here and you're going to be happy. Yeah. If anything, it might force you to make sure that you keep that player happy. So I still think no matter what, 3-year deal, 8-year deal, Batherson, Stone, you still have to 3 or 4 years from now show these guys that you are serious about winning.
Totally. And I also think that it depends on if they can attract some either free agents or bring in some high caliber pieces via trade. And we will get to that. But Before we get to that, I want to actually talk a little bit about the lack of signings or trades that the Senators have had so far this offseason. Obviously, it kicked off pretty quick. We had the Dadonov trade go down. We get Nick Holden and a third-round pick back, and then the Sens turn around, sign Michael Del Zotto, and then nothing. Mete gets signed. Okay, perfect. Gustafsson gets signed. Perfect. But there's been like nothing in between the Mete signing and the Gustafsson signing. So, what do you think Pierre Maguire's impact has been in the front office, and how do you think him and Dorian are working to see what they can do to maybe improve the roster going into this next season?
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? Because I think, especially when you go back to Eugene Melnick's comments in May on the Bob McCowan podcast, what did he say? He said, we are going to, and I'm going to paraphrase because either he said seek and destroy or we're on search and destroy. But he said basically we're going to be locked in on getting a high-end centerman and a top four defenseman. Like, we're not making that up. He said it. Now you can make a case that Mike Del Zotto is the top 4D, right? I'll be willing to listen to that, right? Yeah. Like, he's going to probably come in and he's probably going to, if I had to guess how the opening night pairings would go, I would think it's going to be Shabbat and Zaitsev, and I think it's going to be Del Zotto and Zub, and I'm hoping that we start referring to them as Del Zubo, because that would be awesome. but that's how I kind of feel, right? So you could convince me that they've taken, in fact, I think they have too many defensemen. So I don't know that I need to sit here and say, where's that top 4D? They got enough. Mete and Brandstrom is going to be a fascinating thing to watch. So I don't think they need to do much in the back end. But all of a sudden, you're looking at that forward group. Now you take Dadonov out. So even before Dadonov was out of the picture, I think we looked at it and said, yeah, they probably need a forward. And they probably need a centerman. Well, now you look at this and you're like, wait a minute. Is Pontius Auberg the number 3 right winger here right now? Or is Austin Watson the number 3 right winger here? What's the end game? So I'm really surprised that they haven't made another move. And if the season started this week and it was Labor Day weekend, I think Shane Pinto is on the NHL roster, because down the middle, you'd probably have some combination of Josh Norris, Colin White, Shane Pinto, and Chris Tierney. That's to say nothing of Logan Brown. So yeah. I don't know where it all lands up, other than I am surprised that they haven't landed that forward, but we've still got 3 weeks to go. They still got plenty of runway, but let's look at this and say 2/3 of their top line are unsigned in Batherson and Tkachuk, and their second line is the kind of TBA. I know Stützle's on the left side, and I think Connor Brown's on the right side, but who's in the middle? So they're for a team with, some question marks, there's a lot in the top 6 as we sit here on the 1st of September.
Now, a couple of trade options have been rumored about, talked about, especially on Twitter. One of the huge pieces being Jack Eichel, still with Buffalo, still requiring surgery. He just changed his agent. Is that something that the Senators actually should pursue, or is that just too many pieces and too much risk to really pursue a player of Eichel's caliber?
It's risky. And what you're doing is you're putting this patient rebuild into overdrive, right? Now you don't get to be patient. If you were trading for Jack Eichel, you are theoretically trading some high-end young pieces, and whether that's Norris or Pinto or, heaven forbid, Stützle or Tkachuk or JBD, you are now moving out of patient rebuild into win now. You can't trade for Jack Eichel and say, we're still hoping 3 years from now to be no, it's go time.
Yeah,
I don't think they should be doing that. And I think, quite frankly, I know that there's some people out there saying that they are very serious about Jack Eichel and they want, and I'm not here to dispute anybody's reporting. All I'm saying is I don't think that that's the case. That's my understanding of it. And I also ask people to ask themselves, you've already got Shabbat at 8 years at $8 million per. You likely will have to get Brady Tkachuk in and around that same number. Okay. Are you financially able to bring in $10 million per year guy in Jack Eichel? I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And then that's to say nothing of, you probably will have one of Batherson, Stützle, or Norris, who doesn't get moved in that trade, that guy's going to be getting north of $5 million per. If Tim Stützle is terrific in the next 2 years, he might be in the $6-7 million. Like, you just at some point you run out of financial options to just you can't just parachute a $10 million guy into this equation and expect it doesn't blow everything up. So I think they've done, for all of the criticisms that they've had, and rightfully so, in the last couple of years, they've actually put themselves in a really good spot. You can actually see it that they're in a good spot. Why would you blow it all up? You've spent 4 years telling us to just settle down and be patient, and now you're going to do this. So it doesn't make sense for me. I think there's too many risks. I think the price for Eichel, both financially and what it would cost asset-wise for a guy who probably won't play until the calendar year 2022 and has neck issues, just too many question marks for me.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But if we take it a tier down from there, now looking at like the Ryan Stromes, Tomas Hertl. I mean, actually, in my opinion, Tomas Hertl is a tier above Strome, but a couple other guys who have been rumored to be available in the market. Is that a kind of guy that the Sens could pursue to at least maybe not have to give up too many quality pieces and has an impact on their roster to make them take a step forward?
Well, okay, so now let's look at this. It's a really good question, isn't it? Because Tomas Hertl has got 1 year left on his deal, but if you don't extend Tomas Hertl and you're bringing him in essentially on a 1 year deal, what are you saying? You're saying we're here to win now. You don't trade prospects for a 1 year rental unless you're in win now mode. I don't think so, right? This isn't getting Stepan, right? Like, Stepan was absolutely a 1 year, bring him in, he'll try to insulate some young guys, whatever. But that wasn't like, you didn't have to give up much. I think it was a second. Am I right on that second round pick? Yeah, second round pick for Stepan. Okay. So you're not giving up a ton. Tomas Hertl is probably going to cost you a ballpark of a very good prospect and maybe a first round pick or something of that ilk, right? Like, if you're San Jose and you're Doug Wilson, you're like, okay, well, if Tomas Hertl wants out, what would be the asking price for a guy? And if you go to the trade deadline, he seems like the type of guy that might land a first round pick for you. So I'm cautious on this. Like, I am like, and I see the pitfalls on Sean Monahan or Adam Henrique or Strome or like whoever you want to put in there. There's pros and cons to everybody, right? The one thing I think they can't do, Matt, they just can't push all the chips into the middle of the table and say it's go time. Like, if you want to make a really smart hockey trade that doesn't put I think if you traded for Sean Monahan and didn't have to give up a ton, I don't think you're putting yourself into win now, because he does have 2 years left on his deal. But boy, Hertl's a great player. He's a really good player. Like, if he can stay healthy, he's your number one centerman. Like, it's not even a question. But I don't know about the price, and I don't know what's the message to the fan base if you trade for a guy with 1 year left on his deal.
For sure. And I know I've talked with the other guys on the podcast about trading for a player like Tomas Hertl, and I think it has to come with an extension in place to land a guy like that. And I think that is something that Senators fans would really, I think, get behind, at least in my opinion. I don't know. But definitely, I think if they go the rental route, like they did with Stepan, I think that that's going to draw a lot of concern from some people, especially if that player's not signed and the trade deadline starts looming.
Absolutely. And the trade deadline, like I've always said, the one thing that would be really nice for Ottawa this year is if they got to the trade deadline and they weren't a seller. Like, it'd be really fun for this fan base to, and I'm not saying they have to make the playoffs, but I just think they have to get to the point where if they can potentially not be a seller at the deadline, maybe even pick up an asset, but just don't be a seller, right? Like, get to the deadline, don't be a seller. That would be great.
I think we're all kind of hoping for that after the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of talked about the blue line a little bit, and there's a lot of people who are skeptical saying, okay, well, the Senators were all gung-ho about adding a top 4 defenseman, like we talked about a little bit earlier, but it hasn't really materialized in, I think, the way that a lot of Sens fans have thought, right? You know, you mentioned Michael Del Zotto idealistically fitting into that top 4 role, but realistically, on a team that's looking to get better, he's probably a bottom pairing guy. So, you know, what are your thoughts on their blue line, and do you think it'll actually change mid-season? Whether that means Delzato and Holden will, be out the door, or do you think Mete might be out, Brandstrom? There's a lot of question marks.
I'd be shocked, Matt, if we got to opening night and all of those guys are in the NHL lineup, right? Like the one thing on Branson we got to remember is he's waiver exempt. So if they
Yep.
want to start him, and it's tough because I think at some point you're like, my gosh, we're closing in on 3 years. In February, it'll be 3 years since the trade, right? So at some point you'd like to see the dividends from that deal. But I look at the back end, like I think Delzato, if you start to talk to some people who have watched him, like he's changed. Like the Mike Delzato that came into the league when Ottawa played the Rangers in the playoffs in 2012, that guy was like a real offensive kind of one-dimensional forward. And Mike, I had a really good conversation with him, and he told me how John Tortorella really changed his approach. And he's a huge fan. In fact, Tortorella took him in Columbus last year. And I think if you understand the way that John Tortorella sees the game, you kind of feel like you get some, like when you talk to DJ Smith, you get some similar vibes, right? A guy he likes his defensemen and his players to play with a certain edge. So I think to myself, if you're a John Tortorella guy, you're probably going to be a DJ Smith guy. And I think Mike Delzato has become a John Tortorella guy. And I think by extension, he'll be a DJ Smith guy. So I think I could see Mike Delzato being a top 4 guy this year. And, he also told me he's comfortable playing on the right side. I know DJ's a little bit resistant to having guys alter, left and right side and that type of thing. But I think Delzato will be good. I think this season will be predicated on a couple of things. I think Thomas Chabot takes far too much criticism for my liking. I think he's a great defenseman.
Totally
I think
agree.
sometimes he plays, whether he plays too much or not, I don't know. I just know that he's their best defenseman. And like, it's one of those, look, I got 99 problems with the Senators and Thomas Chabot ain't one of them, right? Like, I think they need to look at doing a better job of insulating that guy with either, I don't even mind Zaitsev, but like just with lessening the load on Chabot. And that's where it becomes the issue for this team that has been there for about 8 or 9 years. When's there going to be a reliable second pairing? Like, we draw the line back to even CC and Phaneuf, the amount of abuse they took on that run in 2017. It's been a long time since this franchise has had 2 dependable pairings. If they can get to that point, and if it's Delzato and Zub, that's great. If it's Brandstrom or Mete involved with that, that's fantastic too. They just need 2 pairs. If they can get 2 pairs, I'm not worried about the Chabot, Zaitsev, or Chabot and whoever. I think they need to figure out who's that second pairing. If they can get that, I think they might be okay. They might be okay on the blue line.
Right. No, I agree. And I think also like Mete and Brandstrom looked quite good down the stretch, and they were able to hold their own. Mete was logging, I think, over 20 minutes at some points. Brandstrom was manning the second power play unit. I don't know. They were looking pretty solid. So I think it's also interesting that they brought in, Holden, Michael Delzato, when these like Mete and Brandstrom, when given the opportunity, really took the reins. And I know they said they want to drive competition, but is it driving competition for the veterans, or is it driving competition for the young guys who kind of showed their value last season, right?
I agree with you. I thought Mete was really good down the stretch. I think Brandstrom was really and it's interesting when Chabot got hurt, and I can't recall if it was 5, let's say it was 5 games that he missed or whatever. I thought Eric Brandstrom actually looked pretty good. Like, I thought Eric Brandstrom looked comfortable, confident. The problem becomes Jake Sanderson is the elephant in the room. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just at some point at the end of this collegiate year, you'd like to think that Jake Sanderson signs his entry-level deal. And once he does that, I think they've made it very clear that Jake Sanderson will be this team's number 2 defenseman to start. And I think Eric Brandstrom, at best, will be a third-pairing guy unless there's some sort of philosophical shift that moves him to the right side, which I don't see happening. So that becomes the issue for me, is in 18 months from now, 24 months from now, when this team is theoretically challenging for a playoff spot and is hopefully one of the better teams in the East, I think in an ideal world, Thomas Chabot and Jake Sanderson are eating up close to 45 to 50 minutes a night. What does that leave for the third pairing left side defenseman? 12 minutes, something like that. That becomes the issue here with what they can do with a Mete or a Brandstrom down the road.
And actually, Drift Shade just commented, I guess, watching the live stream today, and they said, what do you think happens to Brandstrom by the end of next year as he's an RFA? And as you just kind of pointed out, he's in a bit of a sticky situation with Sanderson joining Ottawa later in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you do is you hope that Carolina offers him a $6.1 million offer sheet, and away you go. Yeah, it's a really good question there, though. It is, right? Because I think you're seeing it this summer, too, with Logan Brown, where you're a couple of years in with this prospect, and now you don't know what he is. Like, what is he? Is he a legitimate NHLer? Is he a legitimate prospect? Is he something in between? Is he a bust? And I don't know. But I'm watching the Logan Brown thing, and I'm like, I don't know how this contract's going to play out. Is it going to be a one-year deal? And I think Erik Brandstrom by next year, theoretically, like I said, Jake Sanderson will have taken up a lot of the space on that left side, and I think it is a little bit of a sticky situation. I think there's room for him this year, and I think this is a huge opportunity for him this year to, at the very least, he needs to outplay Victor Mete to start the season. And I think last year, I don't think he at times outplayed Mike Riley or at the start of the year Christian Wolanin, and that's why he found himself on the outside looking in. Now he's got to just take a job and hold on to it. And if he doesn't, it is going to be an interesting situation to see how it plays out with him as an RFA.
Right. We actually have another question from Chris Pierce, and he's saying, does Colin White lock up the second-line center spot this season, and does he have what it takes, or is he clearly a third-line center or right wing at this point?
What a good question, right? Because I think right now, I don't know what Colin White is, but I'm not ready to give up on him. And I know that he takes some criticism. And look, does he make a touch too much money? Yeah, probably he does. But I think we would all love to be overpaid, wouldn't we, in the jobs that we do? Like, sometimes I think we do too much blaming of the athlete and saying, like, that guy should – listen, he got offered $4.75 million. What do you want him to do? Say, no, I think I'm worth $3 million? That's not his fault. So I do think he can play. I think he's a very popular guy. I think if you talk to, and I know that that sometimes isn't the most popular thing, but you talk to Brady Tkachuk and Thomas Chabot and Norris and those guys, I think they really like Colin White. I think he's a guy who keeps them loose. I think they have fun with him. And so, look, I'm not saying that, well, that's worth $2 million a year. And then, that's it. Look, he's a touch overpaid, but look, we're not at the point where anybody's contract is a white elephant on the payroll. Well, I'd love to get to a point where we're talking about them being a cap team and like, you got to get rid of this. We're not there. Okay. Right. So until we get to that point, let's just relax, see what Colin White is this year. And remember, if he doesn't have a good year, they can buy him out and it's 1/3 of the value. So basically they would only be on the hook for $5 million in total. Yeah, spread out, I think, over 3 years, Matt, after this, or they would, be on the hook for $15 million. So this is a make or break year. And I do think the trading of Dadonov, if they don't do anything else, maybe there is a spot at right wing for Colin White, because maybe your center ice position on opening night, as Colin White moves to the right, Chris Tierney's in the middle, Shane Pinto's in the middle, Josh Norris is in the middle, and maybe Logan Brown is there, or maybe Nick Paul slides over. Like, they got a couple of options, but I don't like, if you're asking me right now, Chris, I think Colin White is absolutely positively on the third line to start the year. I don't see any scenario in which he's the second line center. I think it's either Shane Pinto or somebody else, and that's not a bad thing. I think, and then maybe at some point this season he can move over to the right wing if needed, and we'll see. Like, I know his faceoff numbers haven't always been outstanding either, so there's a little bit of flexibility that's there with Colin White too, where I think he can be a 15-goal guy in this league, and I think he can be a 40-point guy in this league. Now, $4.75 million, yeah, probably I'd like a little bit more. I'd like him to kill penalties. I'd like him to do some other things, but the idea that Colin White can't play in this league, I don't buy that. I do think he's a legitimate kind of middle six, bottom six forward. And like I said, until this team is at the point where they're spending $80 million, let's not fret about a guy making 4.75 because it's not an issue.
Right. Now, I know you got to go soon. We got one more, and it's actually from our co-host, Matt Nafe, who couldn't be here today. And he's asking if the focus has now shifted from a top-line center to a top right wing.
Yeah, it's a great debate. I'd even say if you could ask fans right now, you could pick one. You could either add a centerman or you could add a right winger. I think there's an argument to be made for adding the right winger, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you my rationale for it. And I really like, by the way, I really like Igor Sokolov. I just think he's a little bit. He needs another season. Like if you watch Drake Batherson's developmental curve, it was like he needed that last year in Belleville where he kind of really found his game and then he knocked down the door. Like I wouldn't want them to start the season with Sokolov as like the third line right winger because I just don't think he's there yet. I don't think that's fair to him just yet. But I do think that at the center ice position, if they had to start the year with Shane Pinto as a centerman, like he didn't look out of place last year. Did he get dummied a little bit in the faceoff circle, like vis-a-vis what we thought he would be from his NCAA numbers? Absolutely. But that's a learning process. Like you go back and watch Sidney Crosby or anybody take faceoffs in their rookie year, they were getting cleaned out. So it's a knack that only comes with repetition and experience of taking draws against adult grown men. It's a different element. So I'm okay with I guess what I'm saying is I'm more okay starting the season with Shane Pinto as a center than with Igor Sokolov as a winger. And I know that might be counterintuitive because it's a tougher position to play, but I still also think you got Logan Brown waiting in the wings, and you got Chris Tierney that's here for now, and you've got some options there. Whereas on the right wing, I think you're super thin. I think you got Connor Brown, who was dynamite. You got Batherson, who, look, once he's signed, he'll be there. After that, you got Austin Watson, who I think is a very useful player, but on the fourth line. And now, what do you got at the third line? Like I said, is it Pontus Aberg? Is it Sokolov? It's not quite as deep on the right side. Now, down the road, when they get Tyler Boucher gets in there and Sokolov is there and Batherson, well, now all of a sudden you look pretty good on the right side. But we're not there right now. So you're asking me, Matt's asking, what I prefer. Well, I would say I think the focus should be on a right winger at this stage of the game.
Interesting. Okay, cool. I'll ask you one more Sens related one. And then we've got a fun question to end it off because I know you love ending on fun questions. So we'll ask about the goalie situation. Matt Murray's coming back. I know they've put a lot of stock into him, both financially and just hopes that he'll really turn it around this year. Not to say that he was completely awful last year, but he's definitely inconsistent. So they bounce back with him. Anton Forsberg is going to be listed, I assume, as the NHL backup to start. But Gustafsson made a nice case for himself last year after Decord went down. So, do you really think he's going to be in the HL this entire season, or do you think he comes up and really makes a name for himself?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think for all the talk about they need another defenseman or they need another forward, this whole season could very well come down to how do the goaltenders perform? And if the goaltenders perform the way they did in the last 7 weeks of the season, you could absolutely talk me into them battling for a playoff spot. I'm not going to go ahead and put it in pen, but I would write it in pencil that maybe they could make the playoffs. And Matt Murray, the last 5 games of the year, I think he was like 3-1 with like $150 goals against. Like he looked good. When you talk to people from Pittsburgh, and I had a good chat with their old GM, Jim Rutherford, and some other people in Pittsburgh. The one thing that I always got away from the conversations, Matt, with people in Pittsburgh was in the last 2 years in Pittsburgh, Matt Murray's time with the team was punctuated by 2 things: injuries and inconsistency. And if you were to look at Matt Murray's first year in Ottawa, what would you say? You would say injuries and inconsistency. But there's enough there. Like those last 5 games or that little window, I think in February where he was pretty good. You're like, he just leaves you with enough to feel like, you know what? I think if he can get it together and stay healthy, he'll be okay. And again, is he making too much money? Yeah, probably. But A, it's not our money. What do we care? And B, they're not a cap team. So until they get to a point where that's an elephant on the payroll, let's settle down about Matt Murray being overpaid. So
right.
I think, and the other thing is, and my understanding on this, Matt, and I'm not 100% sure, but I've been led to believe there will not be a taxi squad this year. Okay.
Interesting.
So
okay.
It is interesting from a goalie perspective, right? Because last year you always had to have a guy kind of shadowing and walking around and being on the ready. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. So I think you're going to see Matt Murray start opening night. Anton Forsberg will be the backup. And then in Belleville, it should be a really fun situation because the two guys with the keys to the future, and Matt Sogard and Phil Gustafsson, will be battling it out. And if there's any injuries at the NHL level or inconsistency, I don't think they'll hesitate to go to Gustafsson. And I think if there's terrible goaltending in the first part of the season, they'll go right to Gustafsson by November or December. There's not going to be this feel it out process that we had at times last year. But I'm somewhat optimistic that Matt Murray can bounce back. I'm somewhat optimistic that Philip Gustafsson, that was the flash in the pan. And I'm actually glad they didn't draft a goalie. I know there was a lot of talk about take the kid, don't take a kid. Sebastian Cossa, I know was one name. Jesper Wallstedt was the other.
Yeah.
People were saying, should they do it? Should they not? I think out of Matt, and remember, Matt Murray's 27. So out of Matt Murray and Phil Gustafsson, Mad Sogard, and Levi Marilainen, you just have to hit on one. You don't have to hit on four. You just have to hit on one. And I like those odds. So I think their goaltending is going to be okay when they are a playoff contender, hopefully in 2 years or 3 years or whenever that is.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope so. And Kevin saying he believes the Sens will push for a playoff spot, but he'll be okay if they miss. And I think that's kind of where a lot of Sens fans are at for sure. All right, to end on a fun one. So today, Brian5or6 on Twitter was saying how Dairy Queen should give Brady Tkachuk a lifetime supply of Blizzards if he re-signs with Ottawa.
Yeah.
So that got me thinking, if you could come up with one Senators-related ice cream flavor,
oh my gosh,
what would you choose?
You just throw me all my abilities for puns and oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's talk this out here. Hold on.
Wait, I can give you mine. How about I give you mine?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
I had chocolate ka-chunks.
Chocolate ka-chunk, yeah. I like it.
Is that all right? Not bad?
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, hold on now. You've literally put me on the spot here. Oh my gosh. Okay, you know what I do when sometimes I need? Oh no, I'm just trying to think. Okay, like let me just talk this out now. This is like, why didn't you lead with this question? By the way,
I don't know. Yeah, curveballs at the end are fun though, as long as they're fun,
Okay, hold on here. Let me just think about. Boy, oh boy. I'm just trying to think of a good pun name in Sens history. Like, oh my gosh, you've got me now. You're gonna be like, no. this guy's a pun fraud. He's on the spot, and he can't come up with something. Hold on here. Like, there's got to be something here. What's wrong with me?
I'll try and think of another one too.
Oh man. This is terrible. This is really bad.
I mean, one that's kind of too easy is like if you go with like a Connor, fudge brownie or something like that, because that's kind of too easy.
Oh, yeah, all of them. Logan brownie, like there's too many. Oh my gosh, you've really put me into one here. Like so, boy, oh boy, I wish I had seen. Like you should have given me a heads up. Oh man.
All right. Well,
this is gonna be one of those conversations where like we're gonna end, and I'm gonna like 5 minutes from now, I'm gonna be upstairs. I'm gonna be like, see, like Cody Cece's name keeps coming in my head, but why? Like why? Like there's nothing with Cece. Like I don't know why. I keep thinking, wow.
You'll just have to like tweet something at us. You'll think of it like at 1 a.m. You'll wake up.
I know, but this is right up my alley. Like if you told me like you can construct some Ben and Jerry's flavors with Senators players, that should be right up my alley.
Ooh,
Right?
RV Pop had a good one. One Alfred Sunday.
Alfred Sunday. Is there something we could do with Chichu? What's wrong with me here?
Chichu. Oh man, that's a name we haven't
Like,
talked
like,
about
I'm
ever.
thinking cheesecake. Like, you know how they have like a
Okay.
cheesecake ice
Okay.
cream, but no, I don't. I'm not liking it. I'm not
Yeah.
liking it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, let's just. Wow. See, I don't know what's easier. Is it easier to think of ice cream flavors and then work the player in, or think of the player and then
Right.
work in? Is there something with DeMello?
Ooh.
Yeah,
maybe.
that feels like it, right? Like DeMello. What
that
is it?
might work.
Yeah, what is it though? What's the Dylan DeMello?
Oh man.
Marsh DeMello?
See, now this is backfired because now it's back on me.
Actually, now you get Brad Marsh and Dylan DeMello for Marsh DeMello.
Oh.
Right?
Marsh DeMello then?
Yeah.
Like Marsh DeMello ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Marsh DeMello ice cream. It's like marshmallow ice cream, but it's Marsh DeMello. That's bad, though. I'm not going to lie. That's bad. That's not good. That's not good.
It's not the worst, though. Honestly,
there should I have created a bar that like that's high enough that you're like, that's not that bad. No,
Chris is saying Yellow Mellow.
Oh, for Dylan DeMello? Yeah. Oh boy.
This will be in the Athletic tomorrow. I know it.
Yeah, you're gonna see my 30 flavors ice cream. Cuba's coming to mind.
Yeah, you got to get one of those names that rolls off the tongue well, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh man. Something I feel like you could do like something sherbert, like a
Christoph Sherbert. There we go.
Okay, there we go. That's
Christoph
not bad. That's
Sherbert. What was wrong with us? He was sitting there the whole time. Christoph Sherbert.
Quick, funny Christoph Schubert story, actually. I was going to a buddy's house when I was like a kid, and Schubert was sitting on his porch just drinking a beer and said hi to us. It's the one interaction I have about Schubert.
Now, he was a Stittsville guy, right? Was this out in Stittsville?
I actually thought it was in Canada in Village Green.
Okay. Yeah.
So
no, I think at one point he was in Stittsville.
Okay. Anyway. Well, I can't wish you luck with the Dallas Cowboys because, I'm a Seahawks fan, so sorry, Ian, but I know you and Lee will have many nights where you'll either be devastated or cheering as you go to bed. So.
Well, it's usually devastated. It's usually devastated being a Cowboys fan. So, okay. Listen, I hope that Christoph Sherbert is good enough.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think we can end on that. I'm pretty satisfied with Christoph Sherbert. I'm glad though. I'm glad I brought this up. This was great.
That was fantastic. That was fantastic.
Is there anything what you want to plug? Any articles we should be looking out for? More mailbags?
I've got 30 flavors of ice creams based on thanks to this crowdsourcing. No, you know what? I've kind of taken this week. I'm trying to take a little bit of time off. So I might have something for Friday. I figured I've done like last week. I tried to do my last mailbag of the summer because it was the end of August. We're into September, but then we're going to be back into really full coverage of, a couple of things. I'm hoping to have a really good feature on Igor Sokolov coming and a really good feature on Parker Kelly coming for early September. And then, boy, who knows beyond that. So, and I hope if you had a chance to take the trivia quiz I put up, I'd love to know how'd you do on that?
I feel like I forgot to answer questions or something. Some of them didn't show up for me because I started scrolling down. I'm like, wait a second, I didn't get these ones. So I don't know. Maybe on mobile, like not all of them showed up. But
so listen, that's a fancy way of saying you got 4 out of 20.
Well, wait. Oh, sorry, trivia. I was thinking of the article you put out about the arena. That's what I was thinking of. Sorry,
I put out a trivia. You need to go do that trivia.
Is that today?
I put it out yesterday. So
okay, I'll check that.
Take the quiz and then you send me an email and tell me what you got out of 20.
Okay, sounds good. Okay? And for anybody who's watching, if they want to get any future mailbag questions in, should they just shoot you an email or where do you usually take them?
Well, you know what? So usually we take them on the Athletic site, but people can tweet them, and I try to pay attention to that stuff, and it's always fun and even just doing this is really fun because it's fans like you that allow us to do our jobs because there's a passion for it, right? Like you guys and girls that are fans of the Senators, consume all of our stuff, and so we're really appreciative of it. So anytime you have questions and stuff, and I'd like to try and answer them as best I can. So yeah, by all means, tweet them away, or my email is on my my Twitter account too, so people can always connect with me that way.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time. That was a ton of fun, and I'm glad you could join on short notice.
Yeah, you betcha. It's my pleasure, and I'm sure we can do this again at some point down the road.
Awesome. Would love to. All right. Thanks, Ian.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. All right, everybody. So that was Ian Mendes. I know you don't want to see my ugly mug anymore, but yeah, follow Ian Mendes on Twitter. I'm sure you can find him easily. Follow us on Twitter if you don't already at the Centennial, and drop us a subscription on YouTube if you want to see more. Definitely, there's more in the works. We want to keep doing YouTube live streams, so please, like the video or whatever, all that stuff that YouTuber people say. I'm not good at that. So have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. Yellow Mellow was bad, big bad, Chris. Oh man. All right, we don't need to throw Chris under the bus here. Oh, and Kevin, I missed yours, but it was De Melona. That's pretty good too. So thank you, everybody, for your comments. Thank you, everybody in general. And awesome. That was a great interview with Ian Mendes. So until next time, peace, everybody.